Hiring? Every business needs great people, and a better way to find them. Something better than posting your job online and just praying for the right people to see it. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. These invitations have revolutionized how you find your next hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. And ZipRecruiter doesn't stop there. They even spotlight the strongest applications you receive, so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Businesses of all sizes trust ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's with a PH, not a V. That's ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? Dan Graca sitting in today for the man, Stephen A. Smith. It is the third day of May, 2018. Almost feels like summer outside, at least here in New York City. 90 degrees. I'll take it, given the spring that we had here. Phone number, as always, is 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. And remember, Mother's Day is coming up. Instead of getting her the same expected gifts, find millions of gifts as unique as her on Amazon. You get free shipping on eligible orders over $25. Shop now at Amazon.com/Mother's Day. And it's time for some Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Find me on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. And we got ourselves a busy program and a lot to get to. And, of course, the NBA playoffs continuing on. Only just one game last night, and it was a pretty unexpected one, to say the least. And give the Utah Jazz a ton of credit for going into Houston last night. And, look, if you stayed with the postgame and if you read the comments and you heard everybody from the Rockets tell you afterwards, you know what, they came out slow. There was a little bit of a lull to the action for them at the beginning. And to me, there's no excuse for that. There really isn't any excuse. I get it's the NBA playoffs. I get you're home, and maybe you're still a prohibitive favorite over a Utah team, which, let's be honest, how many of us thought we're actually still going to be playing basketball in the second round of the NBA playoffs? Not me. Not this guy right here. But the Rockets went through the motions at the beginning of the game, and give the Jazz credit. They came out. They took advantage of Houston's lull, and they went out there and took control of the game. And the most impressive thing to me about Utah and the way they won that one last night, they had themselves a cushy lead. They were up by 19 points. Falling behind, and then they regain control, doing it on the road. That, to me, is impressive. And when you sit there and you saw how that game kind of unfolded, too, Utah were the ones nailing three-pointers. Joe Ingles. Not James Harden. Joe Ingles. How about Utah making 15 three-pointers in that game last night? Very, very impressive. And look, I don't know which way the vote is going to go. I really have no idea. Couldn't tell you. But if I'm casting a vote right now, Quinn Snyder, to me, is the coach of the year in the NBA. Hands down, the coach of the year. When I see this Utah team, I think back to the beginning of the season. And I was at Madison Square Garden one night. It had to be in November. Utah was in town to play the Knicks. And I was covering the game and, you know, meeting with Quinn Snyder before the game and so on and so forth. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this Utah team, and they were going through the motions. Remember, they didn't have Rudy Gobert at the time. And they didn't have anybody that really packed a punch for you. We didn't know that Donovan Mitchell was going to blossom into this revelation as a first-year player. And this team was really scuffling at the time. Rodney Hood, who now wears a Cleveland Cavaliers uniform. He was their number one scoring option, and he was coming off the bench. I looked at this Jazz team and said, boy, they're going to be playing for the lottery here. I mean, it's obvious. They're not going to be any sort of a legitimate threat. So for them to do what they did and to win nearly 50 games, and for them to now play into the semifinals of the Western Conference, and now they got a game. They stole back home court advantage from the Houston Rockets in that one last night. That is so impressive. Again, I understand that all these awards are based on regular season merit. Quinn Snyder's the coach of the year. Quinn Snyder's the coach of the year. Now, can they steal this series? It remains to be seen. I still think that they're up against it, and I would expect a much better performance from the Houston Rockets when this series goes back to Utah for game number 3. But I'm sure you all saw the highlight talking about Donovan Mitchell and the putback slam really serving as the exclamation point in the fourth quarter of that basketball game last night. Very impressive. That kid is super talented, and the sky is the limit for him. And you know what's impressive about Donovan Mitchell, at least as it applies to last night and what happened in that basketball game? If you watch the sport long enough, you know that great players impact the game in more areas than just scoring points. And by all accounts, Donovan Mitchell had a rough night last night shooting the basketball. What was he, like 6 for 20 or something like that? He couldn't throw it into the ocean at times. He struggled. But still finding a way to impact the game, even if he can't make a shot. The putback slam, like I just alluded to, which was a huge momentum boost for that team. How about the 11 assists? Finding ways to get others involved. This kid is a fun player. And for years to come, you look at this Utah team, they probably have staying power in that Western Conference. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with. They really, really are. How about the performance of an Alec Burks off the bench last night? I mean, you would have thought that this was Michigan all over again. And Houston, on the other hand, they were completely awful defensively. As bad as they looked all postseason, we know that this team is going to score points. We know that they have prolific shooters, and they could tee it up on one end of the floor. Defensively, you take what you can get. But last night they were a complete no-show, and as we alluded to, that all started with getting off to a poor performance at the early part of this basketball game. And what about in crunch time? You know, I expect the Rockets to do better than shooting 25% in the fourth quarter of that game. Where was James Harden in the final 12 minutes? Where was James Harden? You know, this is supposed to be the MVP of the league, and a guy who's probably going to win the MVP of the league, going 2 for 7 in the final 12 minutes of that basketball game last night. You got to do better than that. And boy, I'll tell you something too. If Utah was going to pick a time to finally beat the Houston Rockets, to finally slay the Dragon this year, because Houston has had the upper hand, let's be honest about that. For them to pick this game last night on the road, I think it means even more. It means even more. Now, can they go out there and capitalize on this? And dare I say, take a lead in this series? If I'm the Jazz right now, you know what? I'll settle for a split for games 3 and 4 back in Utah. Sure, you'd like to get both, but you got to be realistic. Get one of the two. And you know what? I think they can. I expect this to be a 2-all series going back to Houston for game number 5. And then we'll play best 2 out of 3. So it was refreshing to see last night when you talk about the Jazz and what they're able to do. And I understand they don't have a lot of household names on that club. It's Utah. It's a small market. I get it. But I think everybody, if you're an NBA fan, you certainly know the exploits of Donovan Mitchell and how great he has been this year. And the scary thing is just how much better he can actually get. I mean, what's the ceiling for a Donovan Mitchell right now? So when you compare, or when you pair, I should say, a Donovan Mitchell, a Rudy Gobert, really, this is going to be a team to watch. You got that tag team duo in the Western Conference. And I don't know what the summer is going to hold. I don't know how things are going to change and who's going to go where, and, you know, all eyes on LeBron James and what he's going to do for his decision in terms of free agency. That's for the summer to worry about. Let's be perfectly honest. But for right now, you got a little bit of juice in that one series, because in the other series in the Western Conference, look, the Pelicans showed you some fight in game number 2. They battled, right? They gave it everything they had. But I think we could see now, especially with Steph Curry back, that the Pelicans aren't in the same league as the Golden State Warriors. But I do like, as I said, the effort and the fight was there a little bit more for me in game 2 as opposed to game 1. Because in game 1, when Golden State was really giving it to the Pelicans, I saw a team in New Orleans that almost had the look of, we're just happy to be here. You know, we're satisfied. We got our one round, right? We took care of the Portland Trailblazers. Anthony Davis at least now finally has a postseason win on his resume. And now you're going up against the big bad Warriors, the team that everybody expects to win the championship. All right, this is all just gravy from here. So they gave you some fight. Can the Pelicans get a game in this series? I think they will. I picked the Warriors in 5. But we still got a long way to go. Now when you flip it over to the Eastern Conference, you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you look and see what they have in front of them tonight. They have a great opportunity to gain a stranglehold in this series, do they not? You look at what Cleveland has in front of them. I don't think it's a stretch to say that if you're talking about the Toronto Raptors, this is your season tonight. This is your season. When you consider the mental block that LeBron James has placed in the minds of the Toronto Raptors and has just absolutely owned this basketball team for the last how many years, this is a huge basketball game tonight for the Raptors. And I'll just say this, all right? I was drinking the Kool-Aid all year for Toronto. I thought that this was a different Raptors team, that they had indeed turned the corner. And if you've watched this club all year, yeah, they've done an unbelievable job. But one of the things that stood out to you was the play of their bench. Their bench was outstanding. It was nasty all season long, and it gave you that depth. So when come playoff time, if the Lowrys, if the DeRozans maybe had a rough night at the office, that you were going to have some other guys able to supplement and contribute to that lineup. Problem was they were MIA in game number one. And in game number one, it was same old Raptors. You get to this stage of the year, and then they just disappear. And not only that, but how about in the manner in which they they lost the game? That's what's got to drive you crazy. They had that game. You know, I tweeted it out the other night right as it was happening. I said, you know, if Toronto doesn't come back and win this game in overtime, which they didn't, I mean, this is going to maybe go down as like their version of the Charles Smith game, which we all remember from years ago with the Knicks and the Bulls, which basically ended any hopes of the Knicks upsetting Chicago that year. When Charles Smith had how many times to put it in right underneath the basket, and he could not do so. That was Toronto at the end of regulation that night. How many looks did you need? I mean, they missed their last 11 shots in the fourth quarter of that game. And you know what the scary part about it is, too, with Toronto? LeBron wasn't even peak LeBron that night. Yeah, he went out there, and he played a bunch of minutes, and he did his thing, but it wasn't like scary good LeBron. It wasn't all-time good LeBron. So you had the chance to get that game, and you didn't. Do you really expect LeBron James to struggle to that extent 2 games in a row? I don't. And when I say struggle, that's a very loose term, don't you think? Because he still was okay, and most guys would sign up for that each and every time they step foot on the basketball court. So I expect a better performance for LeBron James. And if you're the Raptors, where do you go from here? You know, what can you do differently? And the thing about Cleveland, which is interesting, we know they have LeBron. We know they have the best player. But really, their fate is tied to their bench and to their supporting cast. Not even their bench, their supporting cast in general. Guys not named LeBron James. Because if they are going to make some noise, and if they are going to continue on in these playoffs, and continue on, how about just beat Toronto? If they're even going to do that, they're going to need some contributions from other players. And they got that in game number one. You know, Kyle Korver actually showed up, made some shots. J.R. Smith made some shots. The continuing evolution of one Tristan Thompson, who they have dusted off in the last couple of games, the closeout one against the Pacers and in game number one against the Toronto Raptors. It's nice to see. They're paying him enough money. It's nice that he's finally starting to contribute. I mean, let's even throw in Jeff Green. He was pretty good in game number one. So if you're going to tell me that is the help that LeBron is going to get in this series, you know what? Maybe Cleveland is going to advance. Maybe they are going to move on. And that really is the key. Am I more confident in LeBron playing even better in game number 2 or the supporting cast being there once again for the Cavaliers? I'm probably more confident in LeBron improving his game and playing a little bit better. I don't know if those other guys are going to show up again. And that is, to me, what would give you hope if you're a Raptors fan. You know, if you're Drake and you're going to that game tonight and getting ready and you're obsessing over this one and how it's going to go, right? That's what I would be concerned about. Although Drake, I guess, is more concerned about picking fights with guys, on the Cleveland Cavaliers team, i.e. Kendrick Perkins. And if Drake is listening, Drake, can you get to the game on time, please? For once, that would be nice. Can you get to the game on time? You're a big fan. Get there on time. I'm sure you're getting a car service. You're not driving yourself. See, Drake's not sitting in traffic like you and I would be and having to wait in those long lines like everybody else. I'm sure he's got a nice, cushy lane right into the arena, gets dropped off, run underneath, and he goes to his seat. Get there on time. It's the playoffs. Okay? LeBron James is playing in the game. Get there on time. If you can. This is the Raptors season tonight. Hands down. Am I confident that they go out there and win this game? I kind of got a feeling that they are. I really, really do. Because you can't tell me that all of a sudden, just because the Cavaliers won a couple of games now, closing out the Pacers, and then stealing that game one. And that's what they did, right? They stole game one. They had no business winning that game. Because as up and down as Toronto played, they still should have won that game. I'm still not convinced that this is all of a sudden a really, really, really good Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team, even though they have the best player on the floor. They still have to show me a heck of a lot more. I didn't think they'd win this series, despite the fact that they have had the upper hand on the Raptors year in and year out. But that could change, I guess, if they go out there and steal the game again tonight. But I think Toronto responds. They have to respond, don't they? I mean, this can't continue, can it? Because then it really would be something unbelievable. You talk about responding. What are the Philadelphia 76ers going to show you tonight? Right? That's another one. How do they get off the mat after a disappointing performance in game number one? See, I think what you saw with the 76ers is you saw a team that maybe started to believe their press clippings too much. And I'm right there with the rest of them. I was tooting their horns as well. What they showed you in that first round against an inferior Miami Heat team, still. All right, you saw a team that was coming of age. You saw a team ready to take that next step and ready to fulfill some of this unbelievable young talent that they have. And maybe, just maybe, we're talking about the club to beat in the Eastern Conference for the foreseeable future. They're right up there. And Boston, we know that they're hampered. We know that they're not whole, but we know that they have a heck of a coach. And it was on display again in game number one. Brad Stevens is a genius. There's no other way to put it. The guy is an absolute genius of a coach. And if you would have told me that they would be missing Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, on down the list, and this team is still sitting here up 1-0 in the second round of the playoffs, and still with a good chance to get all the way to a conference finals, as hamstrung as they are, no pun intended, I'd say you're crazy. No knock on Brett Brown, but what if Brad Stevens was coaching the Philadelphia 76ers and had that talent to work with right now? What would we be saying about Philadelphia? This is a big game for them. A really big game. I know you don't want to make too much of it because it's only game 2 of a series. And we still have a lot more work to do here. But when you're talking about a team like Toronto, you're talking about a team like Philadelphia. These are huge statement games tonight. Absolutely huge statement games. And I like the fact that the NBA, the way they staggered them too, you're going to be able to watch each of these games individually here. An early start tonight with Cleveland and Toronto right here on ESPN. A 6 o'clock start on the East Coast. How about that? 6 o'clock. A playoff basketball game during the week. I love it. Absolutely love it. And then followed by Philly and Boston coming up at 8:30. So you got a chance to watch and absorb each one of these basketball games. I'd say the onus is a little bit more on the shoulders of Toronto. They need this one more, obviously, because you don't want to drop the first two at home. If Philadelphia should come up short again tonight, you know, you're 0-2. All Boston did was hold serve on their home floor. Then at least you got the series going back to Philly for the next two with a chance to even it. But I think the Raptors play well tonight. And I think that the Sixers are going to play well tonight. I really believe that. But when you look at LeBron James, you do continue to marvel at what the guy continues to do, what he's still able to do. And you wonder just when and if there will come a time when he runs out of gas. How much longer can he keep this going? Can he keep it going at least until the Cavaliers season is over? Because that's all the Cleveland's concerned about right now. And if you're a Cav fan, that's all you should be concerned about, right? You worry about the summertime when it gets here. And I know what all the talk is. And I know what all the conversation has been about and what the indications are that he's going to be playing elsewhere next season and he's going to go to the West Coast and on and on. You know, we worry about that once July gets here. But right now, you just have to see how much he can conjure up to will this team, even if it's to the conference finals, right? Even if it's to the conference finals, and that's where the get off the bus part is going to be. And then they go their separate ways. The league needs this guy. They needs this team to go on a nice little run here. They almost have to. And this is no knock on the Torontos or the Bostons or the Phillies. The league needs LeBron James. Because if you're a casual fan, you don't have a dog in the fight, you want to watch that guy play basketball. You don't want to see Toronto play in the conference finals. You want to see LeBron and to see if he can do the impossible again. Eventually, this is all going to come to an end, right? I mean, LeBron's not going to go to the finals each and every year. The streak that he's been on now is absolutely astounding as it is. Eventually, it's going to have to come to an end. Is it this year? Is it with this basketball team? Who knows? The odds are not in their favor. Are they the most talented team? Absolutely not. Absolutely not even close. Top to bottom, Toronto is a much better basketball team than the Cavaliers. But Cleveland has the best player. And you could say the same thing about the Boston Celtics. Cleveland's got the best player. Philadelphia, Cleveland's got the best player. Don't think big picture. Don't think NBA championship just yet. They got to get there first. And I am really, really jacked up for this one tonight. Because if they could steal this one and go up 2-0 back to Cleveland, you might as well book their place in the conference finals. Because it's going to happen. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. It's hard to find a bigger fan of you than Mom. This Mother's Day, show her just how much you appreciate all of her dedication with 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, when you get ahead of the Mother's Day rush, 1-800-Flowers is giving you an exclusive 24 for 24 offer, 24 multicolored roses for $24. That's only $1 per rose. Don't put this off. Order today from 1-800-Flowers.com. It's what Mom would want you to do. To order 24 stunning multicolored roses for only $24, go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click the radio icon, and enter code Stephen A. That's 1-800-Flowers.com, code Stephen A. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Thoughts on the NBA playoffs? Can LeBron and the Cavs keep it going? Do you think Toronto gets up off the mat? And can the Sixers get back in this series tonight against the Celtics? We talk to you next. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Bobby. Bobby, the basketball boy, they called him. Bobby wanted to go pro someday, so he was always out in the driveway shooting hoops. But one day, his mom came out and told him,
"Hey, your wife wants you to take out the trash?"
His mom was visiting, and Bobby was a grown man. He had kind of missed his window. Plus, no one had ever seen him actually make a basket. But on the other hand, Bobby had heard how Geico could save him money on car insurance, so he switched and saved. So it was all good.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca sitting in today for my man Stephen A. Mother's Day is coming up. Instead of getting her the same expected gifts, find millions of gifts as unique as her on Amazon. You get free shipping on eligible orders over $25. Shop now at Amazon.com/Mother's Day. And the Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by Vivid Seats, the official ticketing partner of ESPN. Download the free Vivid Seats app today to get your tickets. 888-SAY-ESPN is a telephone number, 888-729-3776 as we talk NBA playoffs. And if you want to tweet at me, you can follow me at Dan Graca, Graca. Let's get right to these busy calls, though. Chris is in L.A. Christopher, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Dan. Good to talk to you. I usually talk to Stephen A, so this is my first time. But anyways, I want to jump on with what I saw from the Jazz yesterday. Yep. I believe that they're the deeper team. They go 8 or 9 deep. Rubio comes back, that'd be 9 deep. They're exceptionally well coached. When Donovan Mitchell picked up his third foul in the second quarter, they did not panic. I believe they've been physical with James Harden, and I don't think that was an aberration because they won 6 out of the 8 quarters that they played so far against Houston. So that wasn't something that should have been so surprising. And going back to Utah, if they win Game 3, the immense amount of pressure on Houston to win Game 4, oh, man, that can be a scary thing.
But Chris, like I said a little bit earlier, though, I mean, if you follow basketball, and it sounds like you do, okay, and you're a good fan, isn't it amazing that we're sitting here talking about Utah just 3 wins away from the Western Conference Finals, the way the team looked at the beginning of the season? None of us knew Donovan Mitchell was going to be this revelation. None of us did.
No. I agree, but for him to not shoot the ball that well and still have that impact, I mean, the dunk in itself was just amazing, but I believe his presence on the floor alone, they just share the ball. They're not depending on Donovan Mitchell so much. Yes, he leads the team in scoring. He's their primary ball handler, but they share the ball. Crowder coming off the bench. Alec Burks, who's underrated. They have more ball handlers and more playmakers than Houston does. Outside of James and Chris Paul, that's all they have who can put the ball on the ground and get their own shot. Utah has multiple guys who can do that, who have shown so far they can do that. And Crowder is that guy. I think he was the right fit from that trade coming from Cleveland to have that girth and that person who is going to be physical with the other team's best player. And that was a great trade for Utah, in my opinion, Dan, honestly.
Yeah. It's worked out major for them. And Chris, thank you for the phone call. And this is a fun team to watch. And I understand, look, it's the Utah Jazz. You know, maybe they don't have the household names like some of these other teams do, right? It's a long ways. I mean, some of you might be old enough to remember the Stockton Malone days when Utah, it seems like they were in the conversation year in and year out. We're a long ways from then, a long ways away. But you take Donovan Mitchell, you take Rudy Gobert, different type of players than Stockton Malone were. Let's get that right out there. But still, they're good players. And if they're going to be the driving forces behind this Jazz team for the years to come in that Western Conference, you know what? If you're a basketball fan, you benefit from that. By the way, I just want to say I misspoke earlier. All right, when I was talking about Alec Burks and I said Michigan, I'm still in my Knick season mode, I'm sorry. And I said Burks and I just went Trey Burke, and that's why I said Michigan. Of course, Alec Burks went to Colorado, so I apologize for that. But thanks for everybody for catching that on Twitter. Let's say hi to Timmy in Texas. Tim, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
What's up, Dan? I was just going to talk about the Cleveland and Toronto series.
Yeah.
You think if Cleveland happens to close out what they got to do tonight in Toronto, you think it's going to be a sweep going on?
I don't think it'll be a sweep, no, because I still think from top to bottom the Cavs are not a great basketball team. I think that Toronto will not get swept. And like I said, I think Toronto wins the game tonight. Should they lose, though? No, I don't think Cleveland's good enough to sweep the Raptors. Remember, Cleveland needed 7 games to beat Indiana. And who's a better team, Indiana or Toronto?
Toronto's the better team, but Cleveland had no help in that last series. It was all LeBron James. George Hill didn't show up. Jordan Clarkson didn't show up. Larry Nance didn't show up. Kevin Love was nowhere to be found. Still nowhere to be found.
Right. But again, that's my point. Do you trust this team? Because I don't. You know, that's why I don't think that Cleveland is good enough to sweep anybody. Because if you're telling me, as I said a little bit early on, do I think the supporting cast, the guys that showed up last game for Cleveland, if they're going to be there again tonight, I do not. I mean, that is I know LeBron will be there. I know LeBron is going to do his thing, but those other guys, no shot. No shot. And I haven't even brought up Kevin Love. You talk about a disappointment. Timmy, you hit it right on the head, and I thank you for the phone call. You know, where's he been? Kevin Love is a $100 million third wheel who is being asked to play the role of Robin to LeBron James's Batman. And I don't think that he's capable of doing so. He hasn't shown it. And I know that he's been hamstrung with some injuries and stuff like that, and it's been a rough road for him. And, you know, he wrote that very public omission about, you know, his struggle with anxiety and so on and so forth. All well and good. But unfortunately, it's a bottom line business, and you got to go out there and produce. And has Kevin Love given the return to the Cavaliers that they are paying him to give? Hey, he was part of a championship team, I'll give you that. And he was instrumental that year alongside Kyrie and LeBron. I get it. But right now, when they need him to step up, when they expect him to be that number 2 to LeBron? I don't think he's been there consistently enough. I really, really don't. Brian's in California. He's next. Brian, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How you doing? Thanks
What's
for
up,
taking my
Brian?
call.
Thank you.
No problem. Earlier you said LeBron had a subpar game 1 against Toronto, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. But isn't it wild how somebody or that man can have a triple-double and we call it a subpar game?
Oh, absolutely, because that's what the expectations are. You expect him to be Superman, right? I mean, he just didn't. When I say he didn't have a good game, he just didn't have a great game shooting the basketball.
Do you think triple-doubles are overrated or just overrated or become a normality when it comes to him?
It's become a normality when it comes to him. And again, you know what he is? He is, Brian, and it's not just LeBron. It's great players in all sports. Tiger Woods is still suffering from this. Okay? When you look at guys even like, Roger Federer in tennis, the guys who have set the bar so high, Tom Brady and all the greats, I don't have to tell you, we just expect them to go out there and put up video game-like performances game in and game out. And when they aren't perfect in every single facet of the game, we sit there and say, oh, that was a little bit of a come down for him. He was 1 of 8 from 3 the other night. 1 of 6 from the free throw line. That's not a perfect game. But you know what the greats do? As I said about when I started the program talking about Donovan Mitchell, you don't have to affect the game. You don't have to leave your prints on the game just by scoring. Great players find other ways to go out there and impact the basketball game. Magic Johnson didn't have to go out there and score 20 points to have his hands all over a basketball game, right? Because there were so many other ways. Jordan, I know, was a scorer, but on those rare nights when Jordan didn't go out there and put up 25, 30 points, he still did other things to help the Bulls win basketball games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One more thing.
Yeah.
Like the last caller said about Kevin Love, he's been nowhere to be found.
No.
And he needs to step it up. When LeBron's second best player on that team is Kyle Korver, that's an issue.
It's a big issue. And it's also going to be something, and Brian, thank you for the phone call. It's also going to be probably one of the reasons why come July, when we're still sitting there and enjoying our 4th of July barbecue and watching the fireworks and maybe hanging out at the beach, when you get that little buzz on your phone and you look at it and it says LeBron James has elected to go play blank. But it's not going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay? That's probably why he's going to leave. And that's the reason why in 2010 he decided to take his talents down to South Beach. Because the front office did not do a good enough job surrounding him with complimentary players. And I know some people take exception with that. I get it. The LeBron bashers out there or the LeBron critics out there are going to say, well, why does he need all this help? If he's as great as everybody says it is, or says he is, then why does he need all of this supporting help? Look around the league. Look around the league. Talk about all these great players. You tell me who's doing it on their own or who does as much as he is asked to do for that basketball team. NBA playoffs are on ESPN Radio. Tune in tonight as LeBron and the Cavs visit the Raptors, presented by Barbasol Razors. Coverage begins at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. We'll continue this conversation. Dan Graca hanging out with you today for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! Welcome back. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Get your quote at Progressive.com today. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Talking NBA playoffs. We'll get to some other things in hour number 2. NFL, even a little baseball mixed in. And the news just came down. The Dodgers are going to be without Hyunjin Ryu until after the All-Star break. Had to depart his start last night early in Arizona, and it turns out he's got a strained groin. And the funny thing about that is, and the Dodgers got a world of problems, and we'll get into a little bit more on them, now without Corey Seager for the rest of the year, needing Tommy John surgery, should they make a play for Manny Machado. But Ryu, a guy that you didn't really expect a heck of a lot from this year if you're the Dodgers, given his injury history in the past, he had actually pitched pretty well for them this year and had been essentially the number 2 behind Clayton Kershaw. really exceeding expectations, given Alex Wood has not really gotten off to a great start this season, and now the Dodgers are going to be without him. Just might be one of those years for L.A. where you just throw your hands up in the air and say, it's just not meant to be. But we'll examine a lot of that stuff coming up here in hour number 2. Let's say hi to John, who is calling from San Antonio, Texas. John, you are on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. I just wanted to comment because I know Stephen A. was kind of down on the Knicks interviewing Budenholzer and Kenny Smith, and he really wants Mark Jackson. But, I'm from San Antonio. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm from San Antonio, and I hope they realize that
Mark Jackson's not getting the job, by the way. He's not getting the job. So that's
beautiful.
We can forget about that.
I'm so happy for that.
Yeah.
But the best shot the Knicks have of landing Kawhi Leonard, almost guaranteed, is if they hire Budenholzer or they hire Kenny Smith because of the relationship both those guys have with Popovich. It's just the same thing what happened with Garoppolo and the 49ers. Why he went to the 49ers was because of the relationship. And Budenholzer's been a pupil of Pop.
Yeah, but why do you? Let me ask you a question. So Jimmy Garoppolo went to the 49ers. Why? Because of what relationship?
Well, the relationship that the coach had with the two coaches had together.
But why would that affect where Jimmy Garoppolo goes? See, Bill Belichick traded him out there because, number one, he wanted him out of the AFC so he wouldn't have to get burned by him. And number two, the only reason Jimmy Garoppolo is staying out there in San Francisco is they paid him more than any other quarterback in the NFL. That's the reason. I don't think it has to do much with the relationships. But continue. Make your point.
That he didn't want him in the West Coast, that he was going to trade him to the East Coast.
Here's what I'll say about relationships and how that applies. And Johnny, I thank you for the phone call as it pertains to Kawhi Leonard. Okay. David Fizdale is in the running and one of the finalists to get this Knicks job. And I don't think that would be a bad move necessarily. One thing that I can say about the NBA right now, relationships do indeed play a big factor in things. Absolutely they do. David Fizdale is a guy. He's a younger coach. And he has forged strong relationships in and around the league as it pertains to players, influential players. If you're making a list right now, and I asked you to say, who are the most influential players in the league? LeBron James is at or near the top of the list, is he not? He is a David Fizdale ally from their time in Miami. Dwayne Wade has his back as well. Now, and here's where relationships aren't necessarily the end-all, be-all, though, as our previous caller was talking about. If David Fizdale gets the Knick job, you think LeBron's coming to the Knicks? Of course not. Of course not. But if there's another player out there who's considering coming to Broadway, don't you think that word gets to LeBron James or through an associate or some back channel, and they say, well, give me the 411 on Fizdale. Is it worth playing for this guy? Is it worth going? Oh, yeah, he's great. And LeBron gives the blessing. So if that could send a couple of players to the team, then it's worth it. Mike Budenholzer, though, who was a former Popovich guy with the Spurs, if he gets the Knick job, does that mean Kawhi Leonard is coming to New York necessarily? I don't think that that's going to be sealing the deal necessarily. I don't think it would hurt. But if you're going to tell me the Knicks head coach is going to be either David Fizdale or Mike Budenholzer, you could do a lot worse. But at the end of the day, all right, a coach is only as good as the players he has to work with. You need the horses. Mike Budenholzer was the coach of the year a couple of years ago in the NBA, right? With the Atlanta Hawks. When he won 60 games, they were the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Why? Because he had 4 All-Stars. They had talent. Remember when they had the Millsaps and the Corvers and the Teagues and the Horfords? Remember that? They still couldn't win in the playoffs, but he had talent. And now Atlanta completely just stripped that thing down. They're clearly rebuilding, and they couldn't win. And good for Budenholzer to get the heck out of there. He saw the writing on the wall. He said, there's no way I'm going to be able to win with this franchise. There's no way. No way at all. So if you surround this guy with some pieces and you give him the talent, he's a good coach. You know, David Fizdale, what he did last year in Memphis, in the Western Conference, mind you, got him to the playoffs, you know, took the Spurs to 6 games in the first round. Then this year got off to a good start, remember. Got off to a good start. Then Mike Conley got hurt, unfortunately, because, you know what, Mike Conley always gets hurt. And then he had a war of words with Marc Gasol, and the organization sided with the superstar player. That happens. But if those two guys are, let's say, the finalists for the Knick job, I think that the Knicks would do themselves pretty good in naming one of them the head coach. I really believe that. We got 1 hour down. We got another to play with. Here on a busy Thursday, it's Dan Graca filling in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Hiring? Every business needs great people and a better way to find them. Something better than posting your job online and just praying for the right people to see it. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. These invitations have revolutionized how you find your next hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just 1 day. And ZipRecruiter doesn't stop there. They even spotlight the strongest applications you receive, so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Businesses of all sizes trust ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's with a PH, not a V. That's ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
Welcome back. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Get your quote at Progressive.com today. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Talking NBA playoffs. We'll get to some other things in hour number 2, NFL, even a little baseball mixed in. And the news just came down. The Dodgers are going to be without Hyunjin Ryu until after the All-Star break. Had to depart his start last night early in Arizona, and it turns out he's got a strained groin. And the funny thing about that is, and the Dodgers got a world of problems, and we'll get into a little bit more on them now without Corey Seager for the rest of the year, needing Tommy John surgery, should they make a play for Manny Machado. But Ryu, a guy that you didn't really expect a heck of a lot from this year if you're the Dodgers, given his injury history in the past, he had actually pitched pretty well for them this year and had been essentially the number 2 behind Clayton Kershaw. Really exceeding expectations, given Alex Wood has not really gotten off to a great start this season, and now the Dodgers are going to be without him. Just might be one of those years for L.A. where you just throw your hands up in the air and say, it's just not meant to be. But we'll examine a lot of that stuff coming up here in hour number 2. Let's say hi to John, who is calling from San Antonio, Texas. John, you are on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. I just wanted to comment because I know Stephen A. was kind of down on the Knicks interviewing Budenholzer and Kenny Smith, and he really wants Mark Jackson, but you know, I'm from San Antonio. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm from San Antonio, and I hope they realize that
Mark Jackson's not getting the job, by the way. He's not getting the job, so that
that's
we can
beautiful.
forget about
I'm
that.
so happy for that.
Yeah,
but the best shot the Knicks have of landing Kawhi Leonard, almost guaranteed, is if they hire Budenholzer or they hire Kenny Smith, because of the relationship both those guys have with Popovich. You know, it's just the same thing what happened with Garoppolo and the 49ers. Why he went to the 49ers was because of the relationship. And Budenholzer's been a pupil of Pop.
Yeah, but why do you? Let me ask you a question. Why do you? So Jimmy Garoppolo went to the 49ers. Why? Because of what relationship?
Well, the relationship that the coach had with the two coaches had together.
But why would that affect where Jimmy Garoppolo goes? See, Bill Belichick traded him out there because, number one, he wanted him out of the AFC so he wouldn't have to get burned by him. And number two, the only reason Jimmy Garoppolo is staying out there in San Francisco is they paid him more than any other quarterback in the NFL. That's the reason. I don't think it has to do much with the relationships. But continue. Make your point.
That he didn't want him in the West Coast, that he was going to trade him to the East Coast.
Here's what I'll say about relationships and how that applies. And Johnny, I thank you for the phone call as it pertains to Kawhi Leonard. Okay. David Fizdale is in the running and one of the finalists to get this Knicks job. And I don't think that would be a bad move necessarily. One thing that I can say about the NBA right now, relationships do indeed play a big factor in things. Absolutely they do. David Fizdale is a guy. He's a younger coach. And he has forged strong relationships in and around the league as it pertains to players, influential players. If you're making a list right now, and I asked you to say, who are the most influential players in the league? LeBron James is at or near the top of the list, is he not? He is a David Fizdale ally from their time in Miami. Dwayne Wade has his back as well. Now, and here's where relationships aren't necessarily the end-all be-all, though, as our previous caller was talking about. If David Fizdale gets the Knick job, you think LeBron's coming to the Knicks? Of course not. Of course not. But if there's another player out there who's considering coming to Broadway, don't you think that word gets to LeBron James or through an associate or some back channel, and they say, well, give me the 411 on Fizdale. Is it worth playing for this guy? Is it worth going? Oh, yeah, he's great. And LeBron gives the blessing. So if that could send a couple of players to the team, then it's worth it. Mike Budenholzer, though, who was a former Popovich guy with the Spurs, if he gets the Knick job, does that mean Kawhi Leonard is coming to New York necessarily? I don't think that that's going to be sealing the deal necessarily. I don't think it would hurt. But if you're going to tell me the Knicks head coach is going to be either David Fizdale or Mike Budenholzer, you could do a lot worse. But at the end of the day, all right, a coach is only as good as the players he has to work with. You need the horses. Mike Budenholzer was the coach of the year a couple of years ago in the NBA, right? With the Atlanta Hawks. When he won 60 games, they were the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Why? Because he had 4 All-Stars. They had talent. Remember when they had the Millsaps and the Corvers and the Teagues and the Horfords? Remember that? They still couldn't win the playoffs, but he had talent. And now Atlanta completely just stripped that thing down. They're clearly rebuilding, and they couldn't win. And good for Budenholzer to get the heck out of there. He saw the writing on the wall. He said, there's no way I'm going to be able to win with this franchise. There's no way. No way at all. So if you surround this guy with some pieces and you give him the talent, he's a good coach. You know, David Fizdale, what he did last year in Memphis, in the Western Conference, mind you, got him to the playoffs, you know, took the Spurs to 6 games in the first round. Then this year got off to a good start, remember. Got off to a good start. Then Mike Conley got hurt, unfortunately, because, you know what, Mike Conley always gets hurt. And then he had a war of words with Marc Gasol, and the organization sided with the superstar player. That happens. But if those two guys are, let's say, the finalists for the Knick job, I think that the Knicks would do themselves pretty good in naming one of them the head coach. I really believe that. We got 1 hour down. We got another to play with. Here on a busy Thursday, it's Dan Graca filling in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like a whole new person.
Disclaimer, you will not become a whole new person. This is impossible. You might be able to join a gym or diet program, buy a new wardrobe, get hair implants, but your DNA and physical form will remain the same. Geico waives any and all liability if you attempt to become a new person, except a cyborg. If you choose to become a half-human, half-cybernetic organism with lasers for eyes, the Geico legal team would be cool with that, because, quote, laser eyes are pretty sweet. Pew, 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 end quote.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We're going to the top of the hour here on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN is the number. That's 888-729-3776. And we are brought to you by GNC. Ignite what's inside you, from building muscle to finding the best multis. Get the highest quality wellness solutions and supplements now. Buy 2, get 1 free for a limited time at GNC. Live well. And ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance with more than 30 unique coverage options available. Progressive knows small business. Learn more at progressiveCommercial.com. It's kind of like a weird time of the day. It's, well, at least where I am right now, it's 2:30 in the afternoon, and I was kind of busy this morning, didn't get a chance to have lunch, and I was just telling the guys during the break, I'm like, should I eat lunch after the show at 3 o'clock? Because like 3 o'clock is like that in-between time, you know, where you're already thinking maybe about dinner and lunch is a thing of the past, but I'm so darn hungry. I might have to eat something here. It's weird. I'm like, oh, I have this like inner conflict about whether or not I should eat after the show, and then it's going to ruin the dinner. I don't know. If that's the worst thing that's going to happen today, though, I guess things are really not too bad. All right, let's talk some football with you, and as always, you could tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca. Let's say hi to Joe, who's calling from L.A. Joe, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, Dan, Joey from L.A. It's good to talk to you again.
Joey, what's going on?
Not much. Well, you know, look, 4 quarterbacks went in the top 10. Josh Rosen, I agree with you, fell into the best situation. He's got a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Larry Fitzgerald. They drafted the wide receiver out of Texas A&M, who's a local boy from Arizona, Christian Kirk.
Not to mention a healthy David Johnson coming back, too.
I was just going to say that. Look, the whole thing with the Jets, you brought up the scenario Sanchez went into when the Jets traded up 12 picks to get him in 2009. They had a line. They had weapons right there. Darnold, look, if he was atop the Jets' wish list, then trading up wasn't such a bad thing for them. But what do they have to work with right now?
You're talking about the Jets?
What do the Jets have to work with right now? I mean, Rosen, I think they got a steal right there in Arizona.
Well, here's the thing, though, Eric, and I thank you for the phone call. I think when you look at the Jets situation, okay, are they a finished product? Absolutely not. And you mentioned the trade up to number 3. I can't believe that that's still a thing. You know, I can't believe that people are still sitting there picking it apart. And that's really one of the things that made me scratch my head after the draft. Because, first of all, when it happened back on St. Patrick's Day, I thought the move was great. And people thought that, well, you know what, they gave up too much. They gave up the second-round picks and on, the 2 seconds and then, the 2 for next year as well. They didn't give up a future 1. That's first off. Number 2, okay, arguably, the number 1 quarterback in this draft fell to them at number 3. And it was the guy who, if you believe reports, was the number 1 quarterback on their board. So if that's the case, how can you find fault at all what Mike McCagnon and company did moving up to number 3? They hit a home run. It couldn't have worked out any better if they scripted it. Now, as far as what do they have to work with, well, as I said, they're not a finished product yet. But they have some nice young pieces on defense. Their secondary should be one of the best in football with the 2 safeties coming back again for year number 2. Tremaine Johnson, who they plucked from the Los Angeles Rams, one of the best corners in football. You know, you'd hope to see Leonard Williams and Darren Lee take a couple of steps further on defense. And I think I'm excited about a couple of the pieces now that they have at the skill positions on offense. They've got a bunch of wide receivers. You're going to get Quincy Enunwa coming back, who missed all of last year. Add Isaiah Crowell into the mix there in the backfield. I'm not saying the Jets are a playoff team here, but, if you see Sam Darnold take that growth this year, and he shows flashes enough to what we all expect to see, and that he is indeed going to be a big piece of this team's future and one of the top quarterbacks in the game, I think you sign up for that in a heartbeat. And if they can maybe challenge and, knock on the door around 8-8 perhaps, hey, it's a process. Remember, this is a team a year ago where everybody forecasted was going to win maybe 2-3 games if they were lucky. And they went out and won 5. Let's say hi to Victor in California. Hey, Victor, how are you?
Hello?
Hey, Victor.
Hi, how's it going today?
Good, Vic. What's on your mind?
Nothing much. I had it's so crazy. I feel so bad for Cleveland fans. I personally like Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, but with Hugh Jackson only having 1 win over the last 2 seasons, how long does his regime stay around to be able to see if Mayfield could even flourish? Because the number one thing I don't like about GMs and coaches, or I should just say GMs in general, is, getting off to a slow start or having another bad season, and you have to hit the reset button. All the coaches get fired. You have to bring in a new offensive coordinator. I mean, how often do we see these young quarterbacks go through 4 or 5 offensive coordinators in their first 4 or 5 seasons? So I guess what I would say is my question would be is how long does Baker Mayfield have before they move on to their next quarterback?
Great question. It's a tremendous question. And look, Victor, and I thank you for the phone call. I personally, and I've said this in other shows, and I'm not going to hide from it, okay? And this has nothing to do with Hugh Jackson, the individual, or even the quality of Hugh Jackson as a football coach. If it were me, all right, and say what you want about football, and yes, it's a team, it's a sport, it's also entertainment, and it's also a business. First and foremost, it's a business. I don't know how you could, if I was running that business, I don't know how I can show to my customers, and in this case my fan base, that bringing back a coach who went 0-16 was a step in the right direction and was the right move. I can't do it. And as you said, it goes further back than that he wasn't exactly piling up victories even beforehand. You know, what is it? We won one game in the last 2 years. I need to change things up. I need to go in a different direction because you know what? Whoever I do bring in, it can't get any worse. That's first and foremost. And Victor brought up an excellent point, though, about this owner in Jimmy Haslam, who has been known to have a very quick trigger finger in the past. And the one thing that you can define the Browns on in recent years is their instability as an organization. So now John Dorsey is in there calling the shots and making all the decisions. Okay, he drafted Baker Mayfield. That's going to be his quarterback. But let's remember something. John Dorsey did not hire Hugh Jackson to be the head coach. He decided to retain him for another year, but he didn't necessarily bring him in and say, all right, you're my guy for the next 5-10 years. That didn't happen either. So you tell me, if Hugh Jackson and the Browns this year go, 2-14, even though they've improved the roster, even if they go win 4 or 5 games, is that going to be enough for John Dorsey to say, I like the direction we're going here, and just for the sake of not upsetting anything regarding my new rookie quarterback in Baker Mayfield, I'm going to keep this plan going in the same direction? And remember, Todd Haley was brought in to be the offensive coordinator. Could they possibly be looking at a Todd Haley as a guy that could take over eventually and be a head coach again? I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that dynamic is going to work out. That should be very, very interesting. But no, do I think that Hugh Jackson is the guy for the foreseeable future for Cleveland? No, I do not. And again, if it was up to me, I would have made the change already. I would have made the change. Fernando's in New Jersey. Fernando, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Dan, great show. Keep up the great work. Dan, a big Cowboy fan. Yeah, I just want to get your thoughts. It's been a really weird offseason. Notwithstanding certainly the drama about Dez's departure, learning today the finality of Witten's retirement. And, you know, I have to sort of use a WWE type of comparison here when it comes to Jerry Jones. I am just, Jerry should look in the mirror, and he should just be ashamed that, you know what, due to just some really bad personal decisions over the years, he cost a guy that's a borderline Hall of Famer in Romo a ring. He cost a first ballot Hall of Famer in Witten a ring by just having
Romo's not a borderline Hall of Famer, by the way, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I mean, he was a very good quarterback. I mean,
he was a very good quarterback, right? But I mean, even borderline Hall of Fame is saying a lot.
All right, the fourth best QBR, a lot of receiving yards, passing yards, excuse me. But anyway, my point is that I sort of just have this mantra about the Cowboys, Dan, that until Jerry steps down, it's almost like a WWE thing where when Vince McMahon finally steps down because he's so out of touch. And the fan base is just saying, like, hey, his son-in-law is going to be the heir apparent. You can see that he has a good head on his shoulders, has a good business mind, has a good sense of the operational model that is necessary for success. I just have that sense with Stephen Jones, Dan, because I just think Jerry's been out of touch. And, yeah, the Cowboys got a little younger, and the Cowboys right now had a nice draft. Maybe could have been a better draft. And, a lot of things have to go right for them to stay healthy, and hopefully they can maybe contend against the Eagles. But I just, I think Jerry should look in the mirror today and say, you know what? Here's Jason Witten retiring for a guy that should have had a ring by now. And just over the years of just poor personnel decisions, as a Cowboy fan, Dan, and I know I speak for a lot of people listening today, it's frustrating. And I'm hoping that, again, the day that Jerry steps down, I just think that's finally going to be the day that maybe the Cowboys turn the corner and maybe become this model franchise where they're going to be able to at least have some stable success. Listen, 2 years ago they went 13-3, and they had a really nice season. But until they get rid of Garrett, who I'm sorry, Dan, the guy is garbage. He chews more gum than a cheerleader. All he does is clap his hands on the sideline. I think that just you need a coach that's going to light a fire under the
Fernando, I hear that you're frustrated. And look, I'm not going to hold it to Jason Garrett based on the amount of gum that he consumes. I mean, that's really nitpicking there. And I'll address all your comments about the Cowboys. We'll also talk about Jason Witten here coming up. I want to do that next. But I want to tell you first that spring has arrived, so that means So is the Major League Baseball season. The crack of the bat, the smell of the grass. It's time to head to the stadium and experience all the action. What's the best way to get tickets to the ballpark? With Vivid Seats. Just download the free Vivid Seats app and easily find seats wherever your favorite team is playing. From front row to upper deck, Vivid Seats has options to fit your needs. After all, spring is here. Get outside and treat yourself to tickets to your favorite team. Download the free Vivid Seats app today. Vivid Seats, the official ticket partner of ESPN. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We'll talk some Cowboys as we go to the top right after this.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! Dan Graca in for Stephen A. today. 888-SAY-ESPN. 888-729-3776. You can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca. And you know what? It's hard to find a bigger fan of you than Mom. This Mother's Day, surprise her with 24 multicolored roses for just $24 from 1-800-Flowers.com. To order, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. Before we went to break, we had a caller, Fernando, talking about the Cowboys and Jerry Jones and lamenting the state of the franchise right now and what they've kind of become. And I get the frustration. And look, I've been doing this a while, okay? I've heard from Cowboy fans for a very long time. You know that the Cowboys, when you're doing national radio, Cowboys are going to be a hot-button topic no matter where you are because there's Cowboy fans all over the place. And it doesn't matter what goes on with the Cowboys, fans just don't like Jason Garrett. They don't. They see him as Jerry Jones's puppet, and that's the only reason he's qualified to be a head coach. I'll say this about Jason Garrett. Do I think he's Tom Landry? No, I do not. Do I think that he's Jimmy Johnson? No, I do not. But he's not the worst coach in the league. All right? Jason Garrett was the coach of the year a couple of years ago when he had a healthy team, when he had a healthy offensive line, when he had Zeke Elliott all year. And remember even in 2014 when they went all the way to that second round in Green Bay. And now the Des Bryant play might have been ruled a catch, right? And who knows where it would have gone from there. When you have a full complement, he's shown that he could win. And even last year, where you had such a tumultuous affair with that club, and you had the Ezekiel Elliott stuff, and he ended up missing how many games, and you had injuries on that offensive line, they still went 9-7. They went 9-7. I mean, the Cowboy fan, they make you think that they went 6-10, and they were completely healthy, and everything was cracked up like it was supposed to be. So Jason Garrett is the least of the Cowboy problems right now. I honestly and truly believe that. The least of their concerns. You know what I'm worried about if I'm a Cowboy fan? Number one, Zeke Elliott staying out of trouble and concentrating on football and making sure that he wants to play 16 games a season and not do any of this other garbage off the field. That's number one. Number two, okay, I need to know if Dak Prescott is going to continue to get better and take that next step, because he wasn't as good last year as he was during his rookie season. And now there's no more safety blanket, right? As soon as I said last year, Tony Romo went away. That luxury to have there as an aide on the sidelines, that is gone. I don't care that Kellen Moore is now part of the mix as a quarterback coach or whatever. Stop. Dak Prescott has to blossom into one of the top half of quarterbacks in the NFL, maybe even better. The jury is still out as far as I'm concerned, and that's got nothing to do with Jason Garrett, and it sure as heck has nothing to do with Jerry Jones. And if you don't like Jerry Jones running the team anymore, look, at least be happy that his son has his ear. And if Jerry Jones was still stubborn and wasn't listening to other people in his inner circle, then Johnny Manziel would have been a Dallas Cowboy. And what kind of a disaster that would have been. I think the Cowboys will be all right this year. I think they'll be all right. They're going to win the division? That's a little steep. But I think they'll be okay. Jason Witten finally called it quits. Jason Witten is a Hall of Famer. You know, there were some articles that were written today. I don't know, maybe they like to call it clickbait, if you will. They were saying that Jason Witten is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, questioning his credentials. Unfortunately, when guys play a long time, they get this label of being compilers. It's not Jason Witten's fault that he played 15 years. It's not Jason Witten's fault that he put up numbers. There's only 3 other guys in football history who've caught more passes than Jason Witten. And I know that there's not a lot of tight ends in the Hall of Fame. There's 8 of them, as a matter of fact. Jason Witten will be 9. So will Tony Gonzalez. So will Antonio Gates. They'll all be in the Hall of Fame. Witten is very deserving. And if the reports are true, maybe we're going to hear Jason Witten on Monday Night Football pretty soon. That would be a lot of fun. Thanks to John, thanks to Kat, thanks to Nuno, thanks to you guys. Remember, you can tweet at me at Dan Graca. It was a pleasure hanging out with you for the last couple of hours. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your day here on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.